Welcome to week 3 or module 3, leveraging your strengths and teams. We've had the opportunity over the last couple of weeks to take the assessment, take the StrengthsFinder assessment, dig into it more deeply in terms of how we operate individually. And now it's important for us to take the next step of thinking about how we leverage our strengths within the context of partnerships and teams. And then eventually also consider what that means about our own particular leadership style. So let's go ahead and get started. I wanted to start by giving you some motivation around why this information is important. Just last year, Accenture made the commitment to having all of their 370 some odd thousand people that work for them participate in StrengthsFinder, have the opportunity to participate in StrengthsFinder, and then they also made the commitment to having each one of them have individual coaching sessions. And this is pretty dramatic for an organization this large to do something this widespread within an organization. Sometimes you'll hear about strengths being used within the context of a very small leadership development group, but to have it widespread enough that it reaches the whole organization is pretty dramatic. And I think it's where we're headed in terms of how people are trying to get the most out of the people that they employ, and also not only just get a lot of good work out of that individual, but how does that individual work within the context of the groups or the teams, and how do they inspire and energize other people to do great work so that everybody's doing great work together. And so I think Accenture is really making a very firm statement that they believe that strengths influences that in a very heavy manner. So anyway, just wanted to use that as a little bit of a motivation to think about why strengths are important and to continue to value the opportunity that you have to develop around your strengths within this class. All right, one of the first things I wanted to show you, I just thought this might be interesting for you to take a look at, is this is the there's been 15 million people that have taken StrengthsFinder up to this point all over the globe, and obviously, there's a certain distribution of how the themes show up frequency-wise for that population. So for the 15 million people that have taken StrengthsFinder, there's more people with Achiever in their top 5. More people have that theme than in their top 5 than any other theme. And the last theme is Command. So it's the most rare theme in terms of showing up. So you just don't see as many people with Command. You see a lot more people with Achiever. That's the way to think about this. Now, one of the reasons that I wanted to show it to you was that it doesn't really tell us anything about, doesn't ascribe a value to any particular theme because it shows up more so than another theme. It probably is understood by more people just because there's more people with those themes, the ones at the top of the list versus the ones at the bottom. So if you have themes at the top, recognize that you can probably leverage that, the fact that there are more folks with the themes that you possess, because people will just understand them more than intuitively. Contrasting that, if you have themes that fall more in the bottom, or if you have a couple of themes that are in that bottom part, it might mean that you just need to spend a little bit more time figuring out the best way to describe those themes to help people understand what they mean. And it just might be just a little bit more of a challenge, but it also is an opportunity in itself because it's a rare theme. It might be just the theme that's needed, to help a team be more successful, and there's not as many people with it, so you can be more valuable in that way. So that's looking at it from a positive perspective on both ends. Another thing that I wanted to point out to you is that the research that we've done so far on the students in the CBA, so students like you in the College of Business, and we feel like this is probably going to be pretty consistent with the statistics that we have coming in about your class, about this particular class, is that it looks very different than this overall theme distribution for the 15 million people. So, for instance, in the fall, when we had our freshmen come in and we had 800 or so take the assessment, what we found out was that competition was the number one theme. Well, it shows up at almost number 26, I believe, in the overall database. That's dramatically different than our overall database. So the population of people that we have in the CBA have a lot more competition than the overall theme distribution of the overall database. What does that mean? Well, it just probably means that that we've created an environment at the CBA that attracts people that are highly competitive. So we've probably said things in a way that attracted folks to come to the CBA based on the fact that they're energized to win. and they like to compare themselves to others, and they have opportunities to do that in the CBA. Let's see. Let me give you one more to look at. So in the overall database, learner shows up at number 3. There's a lot of folks that have learner in their top 5. But contrasting that with the students in the CBA, what we know is that it's actually in the bottom 6 of the CBA, so it shows up way down at the bottom of the list for our students in the CBA. Again, what does that mean? I think what it means, what we can gain from knowing that is that your motivation to learn probably comes from your need to compete. And maybe some other themes in addition to that, but that would be one example that I'd give, is to say you all definitely are successful at learning and consuming information and then performing well on a test, but typically it's a because. You compete, you learn because it gives you the opportunity to be competitive. And I think that's different than folks that just have naturally learner in their top 5, where they'll want to learn about anything. You guys will want to learn about things specific to giving you an edge to beat the competition. So it's just a different way of thinking about it. It's not that learners are the only ones that can learn and competitors are the only ones that can compete. It just means that your energy to get both of those things done comes from a very different place. All right, I did want to give you a prompt to remind you that your strengths coaching sessions, if you haven't already scheduled them, are coming up. Make sure that you respond quickly when you get an invite from your coach to set a time for your coaching session. I think the real value of this whole course all comes together around those coaching sessions that you have. So don't neglect to get as much out of those as you can. And I wanted to kind of set that up for you. And I use this illustration because I wanted you to recognize the fact that coaching is a two-way street, that don't show up for your coaching session just expecting somebody to talk to you and tell you what to do. But instead, this is an interactive session and you're going to need to contribute. You need to put as much energy as your coach is so that you can come out of that with a lot of value. And so some things to be thinking about as you enter into those coaching sessions, when you spend that 45 minutes or an hour with your coach to talk about your strengths, make sure that you've spent some time with your insight report. Don't show up having read your report once and then stuck it away somewhere. You need to have thought about it. You need to have highlighted phrases that most resonate with you. Come prepared so that you can get the most out of this. They're not there for their health. They're there to help you be successful. And if you don't come prepared, then you're not going to get as much out of the coaching session as you could. And remember, Accenture is spending all that money to have all of their employees have the opportunity to get this high-level strengths coaching, and you're getting it as as an add-on, basically, to this course. So take advantage of what's in front of you. Know your top 5. Know those themes. When somebody asks you, what are your top 5, be able to recite those and have a working definition of each of those 5 themes. Bring your questions. Bring any questions that you have, and they can be all over the board. You might disagree with a particular theme. You might not think a particular theme is actually a strength. And bring those types of questions and challenge your coach to help you work through some of those issues. Bring your successes and challenges so your coach has something to work with in terms of how you've already experienced these themes. And then be thinking about how you're going to be able to apply your strengths in the context of relationships, academics, productivity, things that you want to get accomplished for yourself. And then also think about how you can apply your strengths to get involved on campus, a really important thing for you to do as you continue to move forward with your college career. All right, I also wanted to take some time during this session to talk a little bit about, some of the other work that you're doing in the course, and that has to do with the Gallup-Purdue Index. We're going to have you actually interview somebody with a survey that was used to create this index, and just wanted to kind of tee this up and help you understand a little bit better what we're looking for and why we're using this information. So the Gallup-Purdue Index is a huge survey that was done with 30,000 college graduates. We continue to follow it up with additional questions and to resurvey folks just to make sure that our results were accurate. And so what Gallup found out from interviewing these 30,000 people can really have an impact on how you think about making the most out of your college experience. And I don't want to get into a lot of details about it. You're going to read a little bit more. You're going to actually read the entire report and get some information there. But I wanted to highlight some things that I wanted you to be thinking about, especially as you ran over them again in your reading. And so one of the things that I wanted to address first is engagement. Remember, when we think about strengths in the context of teams and working in organizations, we're around people all the time. Our engagement is oftentimes dependent on the people that we work with and around. And we obviously influence others with our level of engagement and help people be more engaged or less engaged based on how we approach work. So there is a symbiotic relationship there, and we need to figure out what we contribute and also understand how to react to the way other people are perceiving their environment. So engagement is really important. And engagement is, again, work-related. It's about how invested and emotionally engaged you are in the work that you do. And what we know is that college students that felt like they were prepared for life outside of college are 2.6 times more likely to be engaged in their work. Well, how does that apply to strengths? I think it's important. I think there's an important link between people being prepared for life outside of college and strengths, because I believe you can leverage your strengths to increase the number of opportunities that you have to engage on the campus and be more informed about what that feels like for you, what experiences that give you more insight into what life is like outside of college. And specifically, I would think about internships. And there's certainly an opportunity for you to leverage your strengths when you apply for internships and to help people know this is what I can contribute to your organization uniquely. I might have competition and not a whole lot of other people do, or I might have learner, I might have includer, but I've got themes that I can contribute to an organization that I think make me very valuable as an addition, especially in the context of an internship opportunity. So I think there's a place very specifically where you can leverage your strengths to put you in that position to be better prepared for life outside of college. And I'm not going to go into the details about all the rest of these, but I think that a lot of them you can look at through the lens of strengths and figure out how you can apply your strengths to have more of these types of opportunities on campus. The only other one that I might point out is that third one down on the left-hand side. Being engaged, your likelihood of being engaged is higher if you had professors that cared about you as a person. Part of that is the professor's responsibility. That's a given. We kind of hope and would expect that professors would be making people feel welcomed and that they want them to be there. But also part of that is your responsibility. So how can you leverage your strengths to create opportunities to engage with professors? We'll provide as many opportunities of those as we can, but it's also up to you to figure out, okay, if I don't have high woo, how am I going to approach a professor and ask him a question or engage with them in a way that allows me to establish some kind of connection with this professor. If I have that connection, I'm much more likely to feel like I'm cared about as a person. That increases my likelihood of being engaged in my work after I get finished with college. So it's still up to you to figure out how to do that, and part of it, I think, is part of the key to that is going to be through your strengths. All right, why strengths in teams? Why is this important? Well, this list that I'm showing you here on this slide comes from a report that's generated every year from an organization called NACE, and NACE is the National Associations of Colleges and Employers. So it's basically employers, companies out there that hire people, and college career service offices. And they team up together and they create this survey and survey basically people that hire for organizations, HR, human resources departments that hire for organizations, and they look for the characteristics that are most wanted in employees that they hire. And specific to soft skills, and that's what they call these, your minimum qualification for the role is that you have an accounting degree. You have to have that as a minimum qualification. Beyond that, there's a lot of things that they're also looking for, and they include these: leadership, communication skills, strong work ethic, teamwork, problem solving, and initiative. I could, to a point, be able to make a case for why it's important to develop your strengths to leverage each of these items that are on this wish list. And this is just the top 7. The list is much longer than that, but this is the top 6 or 7 Yeah, six items, and they shift around a bit each year. Sometimes leadership is number 2, or communication skills might pop to the top, or teamwork might be higher. But they're always at the top of the list. These are always the ones that folks are looking for when they're hiring somebody into an organization. So once you meet the minimum requirements, you have that accounting degree, you have that supply chain degree, or that marketing degree, then you better be able to fulfill some of the needs that the organization has in terms of leadership, communication, etc. And I believe that everybody finds their own way to get to these and finds their own way to contribute to an organization by better understanding how they can leverage their strengths for each of these. And I could give you specific examples, but it'd make the deck too long. But I think all of these apply. All right. Okay. So another reason that we really want to think about strengths in an organization, strengths in teams, is that when you show up to work, to work with other people, and it has a huge influence on you either positively or negatively. If you're in an organization where your strengths are recognized and folks know what your strengths are and they figure out ways to leverage those strengths to get great work done, you're much more likely to be engaged in the work that you do. But that doesn't happen for a lot of people. And in fact, what we know is that on Mondays, people have more heart attacks on Monday than any other day of the week. So this is coming off the weekend. I had this great weekend, but then I got to go back to work, and then you have a heart attack. It just paints a picture for us to understand how important it is to find work that's meaningful, work that we're doing out of our strengths, and with people that we value being with. We also know that there's the most hits on a job board on Mondays. So we don't want to get into a situation where work is killing us, and we have the opportunity to influence that ourselves by better understanding our strengths. Okay, one more slide I wanted to show to you. This one's kind of complicated, but I felt like it was valuable for you to at least pull out some information, some points off of this. So basically what this slide is this illustrates the level of engagement from different perspectives. The one on the far left, that column on the far left, is a poll that Gallup does with about 1,000 people every night. And so we're monitoring all the time the level of engagement that people are experiencing in their work. And basically, when we do this, the results are just about the same all the time. There's about a third of the folks that are engaged. There's about half that aren't engaged. And then there's another 18% that are what we call actively disengaged. And these are folks that are basically they hate the work and they hate being with the people that they work with. But they continue to show up. The not engaged folks are more those folks that are there. They're getting work done, but they're not particularly energized by what they do, and they're pretty easily distracted. They don't produce the best work. Those folks that are engaged are those ones that are both emotionally engaged in the work that they do and also committed to doing great work. All right, so that's the description of the three different colors there that you're looking at. What I wanted to do, though, was also give you some information specific to some research Gallup has done within organizations. So what we know is that if you have a boss or a manager that basically ignores you, things are not going to be good in terms of your level of engagement. Your likelihood of being engaged is really pretty low. And in fact, when we know that you're ignored by your manager is more or less saying, just get the work done. I really don't care. I'm not going to give you a lot of feedback. That's going to be a really negative situation. The next situation, that third column, is when you have a manager that approaches your development from a weakness perspective. So they do care about you. They do want to spend some time with you. But when they do spend that time with you developmentally, what they're doing is they're talking about the things that you're not good at. And because they care, numbers actually have improved. They're much better than even the far left baseline poll that we had. So, 45% of folks are engaged in that situation when you have a manager that cares enough to have the conversation. But things get even more dramatically positive when you have a manager that really focuses on your strengths, figures out what those strengths are, and then tries to leverage them in the work that you do. And with that, we've almost completely eliminated the number of actively disengaged people in the workforce. Pretty powerful to think that that's the kind of influence that strengths have, and especially how you're managed. So you're looking for those situations within the work that you do where you get managed by somebody that really wants to exploit and to utilize your strengths. All right. So let's think about strengths in the context of engagement again. And one of the questions that Gallup asks that helps us know whether or not a person is engaged at work is, do they have a best friend at work? And what we know is that folks that can say more positively that they have a best friend at work, that they think of somebody at work as being their best friend, they're much more likely to be engaged in the work that they do. And one of the things that we think's happening there is that people feel safer. They feel more safe with the ideas that they have, and they're more willing to try new things at work, to do better work, because they've got somebody to bounce ideas off of. And again, if we know our strengths and we know the strengths of those that we work with, we're much more likely to be able to have that opportunity to connect with other people. People understand us better. We understand those that we work with, and we have an opportunity for those relationships to go deeper with folks. It's important for us to engage in relationships with people at work, and we can leverage our strengths to do that. All right. Last, I wanted to finish off with some additional information that we kind of layer on top of StrengthsFinder, so we know the 34 themes, but we've also done some additional research on how those themes are utilized in a leadership setting. And so what we know is that the themes broadly kind of fall into 4 different buckets of executing, which is a really important element of being an effective leader, making things happen, implementing a solution. They also fall into a bucket of influencing. So leaders are also expected to and are successful when they can influence people to do something. So they reach a broader audience. They're always selling and helping people get on board with an idea. We also know that the themes fall into a relationship building category. So this is another thing that's really important to effective leaders, and that's the ability to create relationships and connect with people. They're the essential glue. They create understanding. They get people on the same page, and they help us resolve conflict. Lastly, oftentimes great leaders are ones that are heavy in strategic thinking. They have the ability to see the future and help us focus on what could be. They're great at making decisions, and because they collect information, and they're great future thinkers. Now, the irony is that you don't have to have all 4 of these to be a successful leader. And in fact, we don't find that typically leaders have all 4 of those categories. So what they do is they typically have to find a place in which they apply the ones that they do have to a very specific leadership situation. And so what we're saying then is that as a leader, it's really important to look for those opportunities where you're the right leader for the right time and for the right situation. And that way you can maximize your strengths within that context. How do we use all that information that we have in terms of the strengths as they fall out into those 4 different buckets? Well, one way we can do is to use it as a team map. And this is actually a team map of the management team for the College of Business before Dondi stepped down to take the position over in the Chancellor's office. And so what we can look at and recognize immediately is that this team is heavy on strategic thinking. And that doesn't mean the team is more effective or less effective in any situation. It just is information that we have now to be aware of to help us understand why people react the way they do, why they engage in certain projects versus others. And it just helps us have better awareness of the whole team. We would use a set of questions like this to explore more deeply what that team map told us. So again, what are our most dominant strengths? Well, the most dominant strengths fall in the strategic thinking category, and very specifically, the themes analytical and strategic. And so that just gives us a better awareness of where people's energy come from to do things and why they might not engage in other things that don't involve those themes. We can find out better what we do well, what we don't do well, where our gaps exist. So if we hired somebody, would we hire somebody that filled one of those gaps, or how do we manage the gaps that we already have if our team is pretty stable? So these are some great questions to consider as you're trying to develop a team. Your strengths as a leader. So what does it mean when you know what your strengths are in terms of leveraging them as a leader? So your interpretations of your strengths help you build a unique brand. When you can come in and say, this is the kind of leader I am, and these are the kinds of things that I can get accomplished within an organization, you can establish yourself as having a unique brand as a leader. So you're not just like everybody else. It affects how you manage and mentor and lead, and how you understand others, how you as an individual succeed. And talking about your strengths provides the stability for the people in your constituencies. And really what that means is the more you talk about your strengths and the more people know how you operate, they won't be surprised when you make a particular decision and go, well, that's really consistent with what he or she has told us about himself. I wanted to give you one little challenge to think about, and that is, this is who I'm talking about is the former CEO of Best Buy. In fact, was responsible for all the dramatic growth that Best Buy had back in the late 90s and early 2000s. Best Buy has certainly had its challenges in the last few years competing against Amazon, but we know exactly what Brad Anderson, this former CEO of Best Buy's top 5 themes were. And I'm not going to go into a bunch of detail about it, but you might look at these sets of 5 themes in front of you and recognize the fact that some of them feel more like leadership themes than others do, maybe just based on your own biases. But what we know is that Brad Anderson was really effective because he was a great thinker, and he was a great planner, and he was very creative in solutions that he had to challenges that were happening in the marketplace that he was working in with retail electronics. And what we know is that based on that, he was a successful leader because he possessed these 5 themes: context, ideation, input, learner, and connectedness. But you could make a case for any set of these 5 themes of being ones that were great for a leader. But in the context of the challenges that Brad had while he was the CEO, these just happened to be great because a great fit because he was able to lead some dramatic growth for Best Buy during the time that he was a leader. All right. Let's see. I think that's it for this week. That gives you a context of how we think about strengths, not only in terms of how we partner with others, but also participate on teams, and then as well, maybe starting to help us think about our strengths in terms of how we might present ourselves as an effective leader and leverage our strengths to lead in the best way possible. Thanks so much. Have a great week.